Before we dive into today's intense exchange between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator John Kennedy, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our latest updates. This political showdown is unlike anything you've seen before, and the final moment had everyone in the room either gasping or cheering. Let's break it down. Asterisk, it started like most congressional hearings do, with formality, structure, and a quiet tension just beneath the surface. The hearing was on corporate regulation, but the mood quickly shifted when Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, one of the most outspoken and media-savvy members of Congress, took the floor. Known for her sharp critiques and no-nonsense delivery, AOC didn't waste time easing into the topic. Her tone was crisp, her eyes locked on the panel. Her voice carried the kind of conviction that makes even those casually watching sit up straighter. Asterisk, then came the comment. In what seemed like an off-the-cuff, but clearly deliberate remark, AOC referred to something Senator John Kennedy had said earlier as the kind of joke thinking that holds this country back. She didn't laugh. She didn't smirk. She said it. With a kind of straight face that lands like a hammer on concrete, the room fell quiet for a moment. The words joke thinking lingered in the air like smoke. Asterisk, but then she went a step further. Without naming Kennedy directly again, she said, "We have senators who treat serious economic issues like they're doing stand-up in a bar back in Louisiana. It's insulting to every working American." That was it. The moment people started texting friends, screen recording, and whispering to one another, even as the hearing continued. While she never said the phrase "John Kennedy is a joke," the message was unmistakably clear to everyone in the room and to millions more who'd watch it later. Asterisk, to understand how such a statement even came about, you have to rewind a little. Just minutes before, Senator Kennedy had given a statement laced with his usual wit. He's known for turning phrases with a southern charm that sometimes comes off as comedic. This time, he joked about how new financial regulations were more tangled than Grandma's Christmas lights. The room had chuckled. Even some staffers smiled. But AOC wasn't laughing. Her face remained stone cold. And that's when she began her rebuttal. Asterisk, her words weren't just sharp, they were surgical. She dissected his analogy, tore down the logic behind it, and laid out statistics that painted a grim picture of financial inequity, job insecurity, and housing instability. In her eyes, jokes about regulations weren't just in bad taste. They were dismissive of the real pain millions of Americans endure daily. And when she called out the joke, thinking she wasn't just critiquing a comment, she was challenging an entire mindset. Asterisk, and yet what really made the moment electric wasn't just what she said, but how she said it. Calm, controlled, unapologetic. There was no shouting, no emotional outburst, just precision, like she had loaded this moment into the chamber days ago, waiting for the perfect trigger. And Kennedy had pulled it for her. Asterisk, cameras panned across the panel. Some senators looked awkwardly at their notes. Others tried not to react. A few aides shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Meanwhile, Kennedy sat back, a slight grin on his face. It wasn't clear if he hadn't heard her properly or was playing it cool. But the grin faded slightly as she continued, and by the end of her remarks, its expression was far more stoic. Asterisk, of course, social media didn't wait for context. Within minutes, the clip of her joke remark was everywhere. Twitter exploded. Hashtags like hashtag AOC destroys Kennedy and hashtag joke thinking were trending. On TikTok, users made reaction videos, some mocking Kennedy's original analogy, others praising AOC's composure and sharpness. Political commentators jumped in. Some said AOC had gone too far. Others said it was long overdue. Asterisk, but regardless of which side people took, one thing was clear: the spark had been lit. This wasn't just a moment in a hearing. It was now a cultural flashpoint, the kind that shapes how people see their leaders. And it was all rooted in less than a minute of AOC's words. It's a single phrase that sliced through the usual fog of political speak, joke thinking. Asterisk, in the hours that followed, journalists tried to get a reaction from Kennedy. His team gave no immediate comment, which only added fuel to the fire. Meanwhile, AOC tweeted a simple message. If you're here to do stand-up, there's a mic down the block. If you're here to legislate, let's work. That tweet alone garnered hundreds of thousands of likes and retweets in just a few hours. Asterisk and still. Many were wondering what would Kennedy say in response. Would he fire back? Would he ignore it? Would he brush it off with another clever one-liner? Or would he take it seriously? That question would be answered soon, and when it was, the response would leave the entire audience in shock. Long before Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called John Kennedy's remarks a joke, the tension between them had been simmering just beneath the surface. This wasn't some random flare-up or a one-time clash. It was the result of years of political contrast, philosophical differences, and a subtle war of jabs between two public figures who represent not only opposite ends of the political spectrum, but two entirely different visions of America. Asterisk, AOC, and John Kennedy couldn't be more different in style, background, and ideology. On one side, you have AOC, a former bartender from the Bronx, a democratic socialist, a millennial who rose to power through grassroots activism and the digital age. On the other, you have Senator John Kennedy, a silver-haired conservative. From Louisiana, Ivy League educated, sharp-witted, and a political veteran with decades of experience behind him. Their worlds don't just collide, they clash at every intersection. Asterisk Kennedy, with his trademark Southern drawl and clever quips, has often used humor as a rhetorical device. In interviews on the Senate floor and during committee hearings, he's made headlines with his sarcastic commentary, often aimed at Democrats, regulations, or what he calls woke nonsense. For his supporters, Kennedy is a plain-spoken truth-teller. For his critics, he's a distraction artist who uses charm to mask dangerous policy positions. Asterisk AOC, the other hand, doesn't mince words. It's part of the so-called squad, a group of progressive House Democrats known for their bold policy stances on climate change, healthcare, student debt, and economic reform. She's sharp, tech-savvy, and never afraid to call out what she sees as hypocrisy, even from powerful opponents. Her presence alone represents a shift in what American politics looks and sounds like. For her supporters, she's a beacon of progress. For her critics, she's an upstart radical. Asterisk, their first notable clash wasn't even in person. It was online. Back in 2021, after a fiery exchange in the Senate over stimulus spending, Kennedy gave a Fox News interview where he described AOC's economic views as the kind of fantasy you read in a Dr. Seuss book, colorful, imaginative, and impossible. The quote went viral, and while it drew laughs from his base, AOC didn't stay silent. She fired back on Twitter, calling Kennedy's remarks cute, and then added, "If investing in working people sounds like fantasy, maybe your reality is the problem." Asterisk, from that moment on, their back and forths became almost routine. Sometimes it was through the media, other times during hearings or committee meetings. AOC would push hard on financial regulations, climate initiatives, or tax reforms. Kennedy would counter with questions wrapped in sarcasm, often ending his statements with a smirk or a folksy metaphor. They weren't just debating, they were performing for two different Americas. Asterisk, but there was always something deeper under those exchanges, a genuine ideological resentment. AOC viewed Kennedy as a politician who talked down to working-class struggles while cloaking harmful policies in charm. Kennedy saw AOC as a political amateur with big dreams and no understanding of practical governance. It wasn't just policy, it was personal. Asterisk, in one hearing on fossil fuel subsidies, AOC grilled oil executives, while Kennedy defended the industry's right to not be villainized for powering America. Later that day, AOC tweeted a chart showing oil company profits next to rising gas prices, captioned, "The only thing getting powered here is corporate greed." The implication was clear, and although she didn't name Kennedy, his defense of the oil industry had made him a target once again. Asterisk. There were also reports, unconfirmed but widely circulated in D.C., that Kennedy had once made a snide, off-the-record remark at a fundraising dinner, joking that AOC spends more time tweeting than legislating. Though no recording ever surfaced, the story spread fast, and insiders say it reached AOC's ears almost immediately. From that point on, her tone toward Kennedy noticeably hardened in public forums. Even their supporters began to mirror this rivalry. Conservative media often mocked AOC, labeling her as the face of naive radicalism. Meanwhile, progressive outlets frequently portrayed Kennedy as emblematic of the old boys club in Washington, someone who cloaked inaction with wit and charm. Their names became lightning rods, often mentioned together, even when they weren't in the same room. What made things more explosive was that both AOC and Kennedy are excellent communicators. They don't stumble over their words. They lean into the camera, understand their audiences. That makes for great TV and even better political theater. So when AOC finally said it, when she called Kennedy's way of thinking a joke, it wasn't just a spontaneous moment of frustration. It was the climax of years of tension, the breaking point in a long simmering feud that had played out in fragments, till that one perfect storm of a hearing. Observers who knew the backstory weren't surprised by the sharpness of her words. They were surprised it hadn't happened sooner. Behind closed doors, aides say both camps were bracing for more. AOC's team knew this comment would draw fire. Kennedy's team, meanwhile, reportedly felt that the senator would not take the insult lying down. And they were right. Because as history would show, just hours later, Senator John Kennedy would deliver a response so sharp, so unexpected, that it would completely flip the narrative. But before that moment came, the political world was already buzzing. Reporters were scrambling for statements. Think pieces were being written. And in every news cycle that followed, two names kept appearing side by side, Ocasio-Cortez and Kennedy. This was no longer just about a comment. It had become a defining moment in modern political rivalry, one that was about to take an even more shocking turn. The room was still buzzing from AOC's joke-thinking comment. Political insiders were already dissecting it. Commentators were queuing up takes, and social media was in overdrive. But all of it paled in comparison to what came next. Everyone expected a reaction from Senator John Kennedy. After all, if there was one thing Kennedy was known for, aside from his homespun metaphors, it was his ability to clap back with unexpected precision. But what no one saw coming was just how controlled, clever, and absolutely devastating his response would be. It happened the very next day during a separate Senate hearing. Kennedy had been quiet up until that point, offering brief remarks, staying largely neutral. Some speculated he might let AOC's comment slide, avoid giving it oxygen. But Kennedy isn't the kind of politician who stays silent when challenged on the national stage. And when he finally did speak, the room fell into a different kind of silence. Not from shock, but from attention. Everyone knew what was coming. Key began slowly, in that deliberate southern cadence he's known for, leaning slightly forward in his seat. Said, pausing for effect. I've been called many things in my life. Some kind, some less kind. But yesterday, I was apparently downgraded to a stand-up comedian from Louisiana. That's new. Polite chuckles rippled through the room, but Kennedy wasn't smiling. His tone shifted. With all due respect to my colleague from New York, he continued, I don't tell jokes in hearings because I think pain is funny. I use plain speech because Americans are tired of politicians who sound like they swallowed a law textbook. I say things the way folks back home say them clearly. He paused, again letting that land. Then came the pivot, calm, calculated, and precise. But what's truly laughable, he said, is the idea that experience, wit, or a sense of style makes someone unserious. What's a joke, he added, raising his eyebrows slightly, is believing that social media buzz is a substitute for policy substance, that retweets equal results. Headlines matter more than homework. That sentence hit like a freight train. The room didn't gasp, it inhaled. This wasn't a deflection. It was a direct counterattack. And he wasn't done. I've read the bills I've sponsored. I've debated them on this floor. of amended legislation that became law. I've worked with Democrats, Republicans, and everyone in between to get things done. When someone half my age calls my life's work a joke, I don't get angry. I get amused, not because I don't take it seriously, but because I've seen this movie before. Asterisk, now the murmurs began. Staffers started looking at each other. Some scribbled notes. A few reporters' fingers were already flying across keyboards, typing out every word. Kennedy leaned back slightly, adjusting his glasses. Then came the final blow, the one nobody was ready for. Asterisk I. Don't care if someone went to Boston University or bartended in the Bronx. I care whether they know what they're talking about. Frankly, I think the American people are smart. Enough to tell the difference between a soundbite and a solution. Asterisk, there it was. Delivered not with rage, not with mockery, but with steel beneath the surface. He never raised his voice. He never lost his cool, but he flipped the script. In under 5 minutes, instead of looking like a man caught off guard by a younger, louder opponent, he came off like the seasoned senator standing tall while the storm passed around him. Asterisk, the reaction was instant. Some called it one of the most effective Senate comebacks. In recent memory, political analysts began comparing it to old-school rhetorical takedowns, subtle but ruthless. While AOC supporters continued to defend her stance, even some progressives quietly admitted that. Kennedy had handled the moment with more poise than they expected. Asterisk, what made the moment especially powerful was the contrast. Where AOC had brought fire and momentum, Kennedy had brought ice and experience. Where she had struck quickly, he had waited, letting the moment ripen before responding with surgical precision. It wasn't just about political differences. It was about style, generational, regional, philosophical. Asterisk clips of Kennedy's remarks started making the rounds. Two, not just on Fox News or conservative platforms, but in independent circles, and even some liberal-leaning media. One commentator tweeted, "You don't have to agree with Kennedy's politics to admit that was one hell of a rebuttal." Another added, "This is how seasoned politicians neutralize a viral attack with calm precision, not chaos." Asterisk back. In her office, sources say AOC was unfazed. She had made her point, taken her stand. But even among her allies, there was acknowledgement that Kennedy had not only responded, he had elevated the moment, shifting it from a personal insult to a commentary on generational politics. And that, more than anything, stung. Asterisk because Kennedy wasn't just defending himself. He was drawing a line in the sand. He was reminding the chamber and the public that politics isn't performance, even if it often looks that way. In doing so, he delivered a kind of political judo, using the weight of her own momentum to flip the narrative entirely. Asterisk that night. Every news channel replayed the moment. On CNN, a panel debated whether Kennedy had taken the high road or just wrapped a low blow in polite language. On MSNBC, AOC supporters framed it as a distraction from the real issue, economic inequality. On Fox, they crowned Kennedy the rhetorical victor, but in truth, both sides had won something. AOC had ignited passion. Kennedy had delivered precision. And the American public, always hungry for a real fight, had gotten a rare glimpse of political sparring at its best. Asterisk, the question now wasn't who won the round. It was what would happen next. Because moments like this don't just fade. They ripple. They build. And for both AOC and Kennedy, the next move would matter even more. Asterisk, and while Kennedy's words left the room in stunned silence, it was the audience watching across America who would decide what came next. Asterisk. When Senator John Kennedy finished speaking, the silence that followed was anything but empty. It was the kind of silence that crackles with energy, not because people had nothing to say, because they didn't know how to say it yet. 4. A few seconds, no one moved. No one shuffled papers. No one coughed. They were processing what had just happened. Asterisk, then came the first reaction, a quiet gasp from one side of the room. It was subtle, but noticeable. And then, almost like a delayed chain reaction, a wave of murmurs began to ripple through the hearing chamber. Senators leaned in toward aides. Reporters exchanged glances. The C-SPAN camera panned to the audience gallery, where members of the press, interns, and staffers were visibly reacting, some with smirks, others with raised eyebrows. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rowdy, but it was alive. Asterisk because what had just happened was rare in Washington, a political moment that felt real. It's unscripted and razor sharp. Asterisk Kennedy's words had landed not as a direct insult, but as a mirror. He deflected the sting of being called a joke and turned it into a critique of performative politics, all without ever once losing his cool. Whether you liked him or not, it was impossible to ignore that his response had power. And power always draws a reaction. Asterisk on the conservative side, it was immediate vindication. Within minutes, clips of Kennedy's speech were being posted on X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, often paired with captions like "Masterclass," "Southern Wisdom Strikes Again," or "This is how you handle grandstanding." Right-wing commentators rushed to praise the senator, calling his words a return to old-school dignity and proof that you don't need to shout to win. Asterisk in conservative circles, the reaction went beyond admiration. There was celebration. Podcasts and live streams that same evening featured slowed-down replays of the moment, Kennedy said. Retweets aren't results. Conservative TikTok creators layered it over dramatic music. Others added subtitles and zooms, treating it like a climactic moment in a courtroom drama. Asterisk, but the reaction wasn't one-sided. Across progressive circles, the energy was equally intense, though framed entirely differently. Asterisk for AOC's supporters. Kennedy's response didn't change the narrative. It confirmed it. In their view, his calmness wasn't strength. It was avoidance. A dodge. A polished, rehearsed attempt to sidestep a brutal truth about how establishment politicians still mask systemic injustice behind elegant language. They argued that AOC had shaken the room because she had the courage to say out loud what so many Americans feel, that jokes and metaphors don't solve poverty. Asterisk. On left-leaning shows and YouTube channels, hosts dissected Kennedy's speech, word by word. One popular progressive commentator said, "He didn't respond to her point. He responded to her tone." It's what they always do. Make it about personality, not policy. Others applauded AOC for being the only one in the SCA room brave enough to break the veneer of politeness and say, "This system is broken," treating it like a comedy sketch as part of the problem. Asterisk, but even among critics, there was no denying that Kennedy had won that particular moment, or at least held his ground with striking composure. Asterisk in the room itself. However, something extraordinary happened. About 30 seconds after Kennedy leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, one person in the back gallery stood up and began to clap. Just to clap, slow and deliberate. Then another. And then, as if the tension had finally cracked open, more joined in. Within moments, about a third of the gallery was applauding. Some senators turned around, clearly surprised. Staffers looked nervously at each other. Applause isn't common in a hearing. It's unofficially discouraged, but no one stopped it. Asterisk. The clapping wasn't thunderous. It wasn't a full standing ovation. But it was real. That's what made it stunning. Asterisk Kennedy remained seated, not reacting, letting the moment pass without soaking it in. AOC, who was present in the room during the tail end of his statement, remained composed as well. She didn't roll her eyes or respond. She simply leaned back in her chair, arms folded, her expression unreadable. But cameras caught the flicker of a smile, whether it was defiance or amusement. No one could say for sure. Asterisk, what the audience had witnessed wasn't just a political argument. It was a clash of styles. Fire versus ice, bluntness versus eloquence, impulse versus control. And no matter which side you were on, you couldn't deny the electricity in the room. Everyone had felt it, and no one could look away. Asterisk, by the end of the hearing, reporters were already calling it a historic exchange. Headlines later that day read like movie trailers. Kennedy strikes back. AOC sets fire. Kennedy brings ice. From joke to jaw drop. The moment was now locked in the digital bloodstream of political culture. Would be memed, quoted, parodied, and replayed for weeks, maybe even years. Asterisk, but beyond the spectacle. The deeper reaction came from ordinary Americans. People across the country took to their phones, comment sections, and group chats, debating not just who was right, but who sounded right. And that distinction matters, because in politics, perception is often more powerful than facts. Kennedy had delivered a calm counterstrike that reshaped how people saw the moment, but AOC had ignited it in the first place. And that combination, fire and ice clashing in full view of the nation, gave the audience something it rarely gets from Congress: authenticity. It wasn't a debate rehearsed behind closed doors. It was raw, immediate, human, and it left the audience, both in the room and across the country, wanting more. Because while this moment felt like a climax, it wasn't the end. Not yet. The spark had turned into fire. The fire had met steel, and now the entire political media ecosystem was watching for the next move. And that move would come faster than anyone expected. The moment Senator John Kennedy finished his calm, surgical rebuttal to AOC's fiery comment, the media machines went into overdrive. It didn't take hours. It didn't even take minutes. Within seconds, the clip was already online, first as raw footage from C-SPAN, then as edited highlight reels, then as fully produced segments with voiceovers, music, and on-screen captions. By the time Kennedy walked out of that hearing room, the viral wildfire had already begun. It started, as most modern political explosions do, with a single post. A young conservative intern clipped the key 38-second segment. Kennedy's takedown of retweets over results and posted it with the caption, "Kennedy just ethered AOC with calm class. Master at work." It got 1,200 reposts in under 10 minutes. That's when the big accounts started picking it up. One Republican strategist tweeted, "This is how you debate, with facts, tone, and total control." AOC's got passion, but Kennedy just dropped a masterclass in grown man politics. His post gained 2 million views in under an hour. It wasn't just conservatives, even neutral political commentators. Journalists who typically avoid taking sides were suddenly drawn in. One well-known DC correspondent posted, "Rarely do we get a moment that captures the essence of two Americas clashing in real time." Kennedy's reply was not just strategic, it was devastating. By lunchtime, the clip had been aired on every major cable news network, each with its own spin. On Fox News, it was framed as a moral and rhetorical victory. Senator Kennedy shuts down AOC's disrespectful attack with grace and grit, read the chyron on the 5. The hosts laughed, played the clip twice, and used it as a launchpad to discuss woke overreach and performance politics. On CNN, the conversation was more nuanced. A panel debated the implications of Kennedy's rhetoric. One analyst said, "It was tactful and smart, but let's not ignore that he sidestepped her core argument about working-class struggles being minimized by elite detachment." MSNBC took another angle entirely. Their headline read, "Kennedy dodges accountability with Southern charm, but is the joke still on AOC?" Their anchors focused on whether Kennedy's calm tone was being unfairly praised simply because it appeared more palatable to traditional audiences. A guest even pointed out the double standard. If AOC had responded the way Kennedy did, would we be calling it graceful? Or would we be calling it emotional restraint? But outside the media studios, on the raw battlefield of the internet, the reaction was louder, faster, and more unfiltered. On TikTok, creators quickly jumped on the moment. One creator layered Kennedy's voice over a slow zoom of AOC's face while dramatic violin music played in the background. Another did a split-screen reaction, eyes widening in real time as Kennedy delivered the line, "Retweets aren't results." The caption read, "The moment he cooked the entire performative left in one sentence." By the evening, the hashtag Kennedy vs AOC was trending at number 2 in the US on X. Right below, it was hashtag, not a JOKE, which AOC's defenders had launched in response, attempting to redirect the conversation back to the original criticism that Kennedy, through his style, often softened the severity of the issues she champions: inequality, corporate greed, and climate inaction. Asterisk progressives weren't taking it lying down. AOC herself tweeted just after 7 p.m. Asterisk, when someone calls you angry for demanding justice, remember, comfort was never the goal. Disruption is. Asterisk, her followers went wild. That tweet alone earned over 250,000 likes and sparked a new thread of memes, quotes, and passionate defenses of her original remarks. Many began reframing Kennedy's polished response as hollow, the kind of clean speech that wins debates but doesn't change lives. One viral post read, asterisk, but the mainstream narrative was already tilting. Politico called it the most viral Senate moment of the year. NPR featured it in their nightly political wrap-up, noting how one exchange lit up more screens than some full debates ever manage. Meanwhile, late-night comedians joined in. On The Daily Show, the guest host joked, AOC threw the punch, but Kennedy stood there like an unbothered grandpa sipping sweet tea, and somehow that made people think he won.
Asterisk.
Jimmy Fallon played the clip, then added, this is the most tension Louisiana and New York have had since the Yankees stole Aaron Judge from the Pelicans. Oh wait, wrong sport. The audience laughed, but the tension behind the humor was real. Asterisk, all across America. People were texting, tweeting, calling friends. Did you see it? She called him a joke, and he hit back like a professor. This is better than Netflix. It had become not just a political moment, but a pop culture moment. Asterisk, even international outlets picked it up. The BBC ran a story titled, U.S. Senator's calm reply to firebrand Congresswoman sparks viral frenzy. French and German newspapers translated the quotes, offering global readers a look into America's latest culture war flashpoint. Asterisk, back in Washington, both camps were already planning the next move. AOC's team prepared a follow-up video, one that would double down on her policy points and frame her original comment as a wake-up call, not a personal insult. Kennedy's staff was fielding media requests from every network, carefully choosing which interviews to accept to maintain the mystique of his composed response. Asterisk. But there was no denying it. A digital war had erupted. And in this war, viral speed was everything. It didn't matter who was right anymore. It mattered who owned the moment. Asterisk, in the age of the 24-hour news cycle. A 5-minute exchange had become a full-fledged narrative. It had characters, it had conflict, it had style, substance, and stakes. And like all viral moments, it would eventually fade. As the dust settled from the viral storm, something became clear. This wasn't just a moment. It was a marker. One of those rare political flashes that leaves a lasting impression long after the hashtags. Stop trending. Asterisk, the Kennedy versus AOC exchange had taken on a life of its own. It had begun as a heated comment in a congressional hearing, evolved into a viral sensation, and by the end, had carved out two crystal-clear visions of American political identity. Both had their champions. Both had their critics. But no one could deny everyone was paying attention. Asterisk, for Senator John Kennedy, the impact was immediate. His calm, steel-edged response to being called a joke had gone far beyond damage control. It had reframed him not as a caricature of folksy charm, but as a seasoned statesman who could turn critique into composure, heat into clarity. Conservative circles praised him as the last of a dying breed, a politician who could cut deep without ever raising his voice. Asterisk, donors and grassroots supporters flooded his inbox. Emails with subject lines like Kennedy's comeback and support the gentleman fighter went viral in Republican fundraising circles. His polling numbers, particularly among independents and older moderates, received a noticeable bump. Even some swing voters, fatigued by constant outrage, found themselves drawn to his restraint. Asterisk, Kennedy didn't gloat.
He gave one follow-up
interview, brief and measured. In it, he said, asterisk, greater than look, I don't take things personally. I just think there's a difference between calling attention and getting results. We all have different styles. Just prefer mine to come with substance. Asterisk, that quote, simple, pointed, was shared nearly as much as the original clip. Asterisk, but perhaps the more surprising part of this story was what happened on the other side. Asterisk AOC didn't back down. In fact, she doubled down. She released a 5-minute video from her office in front of a bookshelf and a single U.S. flag, looking directly into the camera. Asterisk greater than this was never about personalities, she began. This was about a system where too many people are suffering while those in power make folksy jokes instead of fundamental change. She continued. Greater than yes, I called it out. And yes, I said, what many Americans feel, that if our representatives can't take the fire, they probably don't feel the heat of everyday life the way the rest of us do. Asterisk her base, young, progressive, digitally connected, lit up with support. They appreciated that she had not softened her position for the sake of optics. For them, she had spoken truth to power. Her online army crafted slogans from her quotes, shared stories of their struggles, and once again proved that in the age of digital politics, voice matters more than volume. Asterisk, but beneath all the online noise and network spin, something deeper was happening. Asterisk across the country. Americans who weren't political junkies, who don't live on X, who don't watch every hearing, who don't hang on every headline, were listening. This clash between Kennedy and AOC became a kind of national Rorschach test. People saw in it what they already believed. Asterisk to some, AOC was the righteous disruptor, unwilling to let comfort win over confrontation. To others, Kennedy was the dignified adult in the room, reminding the nation that grace under pressure still matters. Asterisk, but everyone agreed on one thing. It mattered. It's not because it changed any laws, not because it shifted congressional control, but because it revealed something that politics rarely allows. Authenticity. Asterisk here were two leaders, separated by generation, region, background, and ideology, yet both commanding a moment in their own way. And that contrast sparked a rare kind of clarity. Asterisk the story from AOC's jab to Kennedy's retort, from the gasps in the room to the viral explosion online, had finally reached its end. But the message it left behind would echo long after. Asterisk for politicians, it was a reminder. In the age of cameras and clicks, how you deliver your message matters as much as the message itself. Poise can be as powerful as passion, and when fire meets ice, the whole room heats up. Asterisk for the public. It was a challenge. Are we consuming politics as entertainment or engaging in it as citizens? Are we chasing sound bites or searching for substance? Asterisk, and for the system battered, divided, and often disillusioned, it was proof that people are still watching. They notice. They care. They react when something real breaks through the noise. Asterisk, in the end. Neither Kennedy nor AOC won in the traditional sense. This wasn't a contest with a trophy. It was a collision of truths, a flash of unfiltered politics in a time of carefully curated narratives. And that made it rare. It made it memorable. Asterisk, so as the headlines moved on and new debates took center stage, the Kennedy AOC moment remained not as a viral clip. It's not as a partisan weapon, but as a small, sharp reminder of the enduring power of words spoken in the right moment with the right tone to the right audience. Asterisk, the story ended where it began, on the Senate floor, among policy papers and camera lenses, but its impact rippled far beyond those walls. Asterisk, and somewhere out there, a young student, a retired veteran, a single mom, a tired worker, someone who normally tunes out politics, remembered that day, not for who shouted loudest, but for what it revealed. Because moments like this aren't about the moment itself. They're about what we remember long after. Subscribe, like, and share. If you believe in hearing both sides, asterisk,